Everyone thinks the Georgian era on screen begins and ends with Jane Austen. But buried in the archives are wild true stories about slave traders' wives, aristocrats gambling away their daughters, and even a young Helena Bonham Carter caught in a scandalous marriage plot that would make a Bridgerton blush. Here are some of the hidden Georgian-era dramas you're probably not watching. Jamaica Inn is the kind of adaptation that reminds you the BBC still knows how to do a proper Gothic period drama. It opens with Mary Yellen, played by Jessica Brown Findlay from Downton Abbey, arriving at a windswept, isolated inn on the Cornish coast, fresh off losing her mother. She comes to live with her Aunt Patience, only to find her Uncle Joss waiting, a brute played by Sean Harris, who's running a full-on smuggling gang out of the inn. What sets this apart is the atmosphere. It's all fog and moors, and the sense that nothing good is ever going to happen at that inn. Jem Merlin, Matthew McNulty, the younger brother, turns up as the bad boy love interest. But the real draw is how far the story pushes its characters, especially Mary, whose ideas about right and wrong get tested by everything going on around her. BAFTA winner Philippa Lowthorpe directs, with a script by Emma Frost, and the whole thing feels true to Daphne du Maurier's original novel. Is it the best Jamaica Inn ever made? No, but it's a reminder that even now, the BBC can still pull off a classic. The critics called it sex and skullduggery in du Maurier country, and honestly, that about covers it. Most British period dramas stick with the upstairs crowd. Garrow's Law flips that on its head, taking you straight into the grit of the working class, right into the 18th century England's legal system. No fancy parties here, instead you get slums, dirt, real hunger, and a court system that's basically built to crush people. Andrew Buchan leads as William Garrow, a young barrister who ends up fighting for the rights of prisoners at the Old Bailey. This is all based on actual court records. Garrow, along with his mentor, played by Alan Armstrong, basically invents the idea of innocent until proven guilty. As he pushes back against the status quo, he goes head-to-head with some of the era's most powerful figures, corrupt members of parliament, ruthless bounty hunters, judges who'd rather see a hanging than a fair trial. What's striking here is the accuracy. The series nails the period detail, everything from how people dressed to how courtrooms worked. It balances the darkness of the cases with just enough humor to keep it from getting bleak. And Lindsay Marshall brings a lot of heart as Lady Sarah Hill. A Hazard of Hearts is early Helena Bonham Carter, and honestly, it's the kind of story that makes you wonder how the upper classes ever survived themselves. Sir Giles Staverley, compulsive gambler, runs out of money and, because this is Georgian England, bets his own daughter's hand in marriage in a final game of dice. Loses, of course, and promptly kills himself out of shame. What follows is just layers of melodrama. The winner, Lord Rotham, is no prize himself, so Lord Vulcan steps in, challenges him to another game, and ends up with both the estate and the daughter. Vulcan doesn't even really want the prize until his friend insists they go check out the property, and then he actually meets Serena, played by Helena Bonham Carter, and the story shifts. Diana Rigg and Edward Fox fill out the cast, and the whole thing is as over-the-top as you'd hope for late 80s British TV. There's tragedy, love, redemption, and more than a little absurdity. But it works because it never really apologizes for being a romantic drama with big emotions. Carter already shows some of what would make her such a big name later. If you want the ugly truth about the British Empire, A Respectable Trade lays it out. Set in Bristol in 1788, right in the middle of the Atlantic slave trade, it tells the story of Frances Scott, Emma Fielding, an educated woman who ends up marrying a slave trader out of desperation. There's no romanticizing what's going on. The show puts greed, cruelty, and the real cost of slavery front and center. Every year, the Empire's ships are moving tens of thousands of captives across the Atlantic. Some are speaking out, but most of society just calls it business. This isn't the usual soft-focus costume drama. Adapted by Philippa Gregory from her novel, the series dives into the relationships that kept the trade going, but also gives every character real depth. Anna Massey and Warren Clark, still best remembered for Clockwork Orange, round out the cast, but it's Emma Fielding who carries it. Her Frances Scott is complicated, trapped by the world, but still trying to hold on to some sense of right and wrong, even when everything's stacked against her. Aristocrats is the kind of period drama that should have blown up bigger. Adapted from Stella Tilliard's bestseller, which, for what it's worth, got credited with making history sexy again by the London Sunday Times, this BBC epic is all about the Lennox sisters, Caroline, Emily, Louisa, and Sarah. Not your average family, they're great-granddaughters of King Charles II and his French mistress, and they don't exactly shy away from trouble. Unconventional ideas, risky affairs, and public scandals follow them everywhere they go. The entire story really happened. Nothing in this one is pure invention. It's a family saga that goes straight through 2 generations, covering everything from glittering palaces to total disgrace. Production-wise, this is BBC with David Snowden, the same guy behind Great Expectations, producing. He put it best. As far as characters and plot, Aristocrats could be a classic novel, but it isn't. It actually happened. The cast is packed. Julian Fellows, Alan Armstrong, Anne-Marie Duff, Ben Daniels. The result is a show that's gorgeous to look at, but never lets you forget that these aristocrats were usually one bad decision away from wrecking everything. Bright Star does something most period films can't pull off. It actually feels like a real place and time, not just a museum set. Jane Campion tells the story of poet John Keats and his muse Fanny Brawne, focusing on their romance that goes from hopeful to heartbreaking as Keats's health collapses. Ben Whishaw and Abby Cornish lead the cast, and there's this constant tension between poetry and poverty, between fleeting life and lasting art. You get a sense of what daily life actually looked and sounded like. The houses, the rooms, the weather, the wind in the reeds, all of it shot in a way that never feels fake or overly precious. The script isn't in a rush to sell you on romance. Instead, it trusts the little moments. Campion builds her film out of details, just like Keats built his poetry, and you feel it. Masterpiece Theatre is usually the last place you'd expect to find something this cheeky, but the BBC's Casanova is pretty much the anti-Pride and Prejudice. This is Giacomo Casanova as a full-blown disaster in progress. Reckless, self-mythologizing, and rarely sober. David Tennant plays the young Casanova, born to an actress who mostly ignored him. He reinvents himself constantly. Scholar, lawyer, doctor, whatever gets him into the right rooms in Venice. The thing is, he's always looking for the one. Perfect happiness with one true love, even while bouncing from bed to bed. Laura Fraser plays Henriette, the woman who haunts him, and Peter O'Toole turns up as the old, faded Casanova, telling his story to a housemaid who's a lot more interested than she lets on. The first half is all chaos and comic timing, but as things get serious, the heartbreak lands hard. The real tragedy is that Casanova, for all his confidence, never really gets what he's after. The BBC leans into both sides, funny and sad, and it's actually a great watch. Some movies just embrace being wicked, and Dangerous Liaisons is right at the top of the pile. This is 18th century French high society at its nastiest. Manipulation, betrayal, and a kind of bored cruelty that makes you wonder how anyone made it out alive. Glenn Close and John Malkovich play ex-lovers who get their kicks by destroying the reputations of everyone around them. They're so cynical and calculating, it almost stops being about sex and turns into something way more twisted, a game of who can do the most damage, just because they're bored and have nothing better to do. The targets, Michelle Pfeiffer and Uma Thurman, playing impossibly naive angels, never stand a chance. But as soon as Malkovich catches actual feelings for one of his victims, the real knives come out. Glenn Close won't have it, and the final act is pure revenge. Whenever Milos Forman makes a film, you know you're getting something different, and Goya's Ghost is no exception. It's not a simple biopic. It's more like a meditation on inspiration, politics, and how artists survive in a world that mostly wants to chew them up. Stellan Skarsgård is Francisco Goya, whose paintings swing between royal pageantry and graphic nightmares. Natalie Portman plays his muse, who's accused of heresy and thrown into the hell of the Spanish Inquisition. Javier Bardem, meanwhile, plays Lorenzo, a power-hungry monk who's Goya's old friend, but now stands in judgment. The film jumps from the height of the Inquisition to Napoleon's invasion, and instead of focusing just on the plot, Forman seems obsessed with recreating Goya's paintings on screen. It's a strange movie, and critics were divided, but you can't deny the atmosphere. If anything, it's a movie about the cost of survival, the price of looking at the world honestly, even when everything goes to hell.